Using Marketing Cloud with more than one Salesforce org requires some architectural decisions because there are a few different approaches you can take, and each one of them has their own trade-offs. In this video series, I'm going to cover those approaches, and we're going to talk about the benefits and the limitations of each one. Let's go ahead and get started. We'll start with the most straightforward option, which is to use Marketing Cloud's out-of-the-box MultiOrg connector. Now this connector does exactly what it sounds like. It allows you to connect a single Marketing Cloud instance to multiple Salesforce orgs. And there are a lot of benefits to using this connector. In fact, it's really similar to the standard single org Marketing Cloud connector in that it allows you to do things like adding a contact to a journey based on an action in your Salesforce org, or sending marketing emails to a report in Salesforce and sending data from Marketing Cloud back to one of your Salesforce orgs to report on the Salesforce side. And it also has a pretty low cost of ownership because once you set up this connector, it's pretty straightforward and has pretty low maintenance requirements. So you might be wondering why we don't just recommend this as the only approach. Well, it actually has some limitations too. For starters, the MultiOrg connector requires you to use business units, which are not required if you want to use the single org connector. And this has some implications, especially if you're in a scenario where you're already using the single org connector to connect one Salesforce org and you're adding additional orgs to your landscape. One thing to keep in mind is that business units require the Enterprise edition of Marketing Cloud, which means that if you're not currently using that edition and you want to use the MultiOrg connector, you're going to have to upgrade. But also, once you set up your business units and you add your additional Salesforce orgs to your landscape, you're going to need to specify which business unit the contacts from each org go to. And if you have journeys or templates or any of the other artifacts within Marketing Cloud that are not tied to specific business units, you may need to do a lot of rework to make those work once you set up the MultiOrg connector. Another thing to keep in mind if you're using this approach is that you're going to want to make sure that all of the contacts you're loading into Marketing Cloud come from one of the orgs that's connected to it. And the reason for this has to do with an ID in Marketing Cloud's database called a subscriber key. The subscriber key is what Marketing Cloud uses to identify each contact that it's sending communications out to. And if all of your contacts are coming from a Salesforce org, Marketing Cloud will use the contact IDs within Salesforce to create subscriber IDs in its own database. However, if you're loading them from a third-party system or a flat file or using any other method to get contacts into Marketing Cloud, they won't have a Salesforce contact ID, so Marketing Cloud will use their email address to create a subscriber key. And what this can do is it can put you in a situation where you have mixed keys and you've got the same contacts in Marketing Cloud more than once. You're going to have a really hard time identifying the duplicates, and Marketing Cloud won't be able to identify them easily either. So people will be getting duplicate emails. They might have issues unsubscribing, and then you'll have issues running reports and getting accurate information. So you should not be connecting any other systems directly to Marketing Cloud if you're using the MultiOrg connector. If you need to load data in from another system, you need to connect that system to Salesforce, load the contacts into Salesforce, and then let Salesforce load them into Marketing Cloud through the connector. And the last thing to consider is that once you turn on the MultiOrg connector, you can't turn it back off. So when you're determining whether or not you want to use it, you should also be thinking about your overall Salesforce org strategy. Now, if you already have multiple orgs in your landscape and you want to use centralized marketing, so maybe you've got different departments that have their own Salesforce orgs, but you're going to use business units to separate out the marketing for each department in Marketing Cloud, the MultiOrg connector is a great fit. However, if you have some orgs in your landscape that are only there temporarily, like let's say maybe your organization acquired another organization and you've got a new Salesforce org, but your goal is eventually to consolidate both orgs into one single org, then you might want to reconsider using the MultiOrg connector because ultimately you're not going to need it. So keep that in mind as well. If you're planning to connect multiple Salesforce orgs to a single Marketing Cloud instance, the MultiOrg connector is going to be your best approach in the majority of scenarios. But that said, there are some limitations like I mentioned, and if you have concerns about any of those limitations, I'm going to cover some alternate approaches in the other videos in this series. So make sure to check those out. Also make sure to like and subscribe if you found this content to be helpful. I'm looking forward to seeing you next time.